Welcome to the Southampton Town Conservation Board meeting of March 14th, 2018. What is your pleasure on the minutes of February 28th, 2018?
Motion to approve as presented or amended?
Second?
So moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Abstain.
Now, we need to do a roll call vote for the process here. So let's just, you abstained.
For reasons that I wasn't here last meeting.
That's a good reason.
Right.
Now, just for the protocol, do we say our name and then vote?
I believe you asked the
I would
name.
just,
I think you asked the name. Mr.
I would
Levy.
just say the names and, well,
Okay.
indicate whether or not they're present or absent.
Mike?
Right. Michael Tessitore, abstain.
Sunshine.
Sunshine Gums accepts the minutes.
Tom Rickenback, approve.
Harry Ludlow, approve.
George, aye.
Approve, George?
Yes, he said,
Or-
he did a little bit differently.
For the record, Jeremiah Collins and Ann Alcieri are absent tonight.
Yes, so they will not be voting on any of these resolutions. First is the Planning Board Advisory Report, Lewis Road PRD subdivision.
Good evening, members of the board. Marty Shea, Chief Environmental Analyst for the town. This is an advisory referral from the town planning board that relates to a subdivision application that's in the pre-application stage. Subdivision is entitled the Lewis Road PRD. The track is located at Lewis Road and Spinney Road in the Hamlet East Quad. For the board's information, I have circulated packet of materials that relate to this application. The documents include the pre-application form, various maps, and stats with regards to the proposed project. The documents being offered tonight to give the Conservation Board full opportunity to review these materials prior to the next board meeting, which is scheduled for March 28th. At that time, the board will consider a draft advisory report and look to take action on such report. In the event that any members of the board, upon review of the information, have questions, I recommend that you contact me, and in coordination with the planning division, I'll respond and provide any needed clarification. Thank you.
Resolution to withdraw A170 615 37 Westminster Road LLC. Is there a motion to accept the request?
Motion to accept.
Second.
Resolved that the Town Conservation Board hereby accepts the withdrawal without prejudice of wetlands permit application number A170615. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Just for the record, everybody is in favor. Resolution of conditional approval A170 330 John Bader. Any discussion?
Move to issue?
Second.
Resolve that a conditional wetland permit approval be granted to John Bader for the proposed project upon the terms and conditions set forth therein. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A170 395 Anthony Alfiero and Catherine Ann Buckley. Any discussion?
Move to issue?
Second.
Resolve that a conditional wetland permit approval be granted to Anthony Alfiero and Catherine Ann Buckley for the proposed project upon the terms and conditions set forth therein. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A170 510 John Dunn. Any discussion?
Move to issue?
Second.
Resolved that a conditional wetland permit approval be granted to John Dunn for the proposed project upon the terms and conditions set forth therein. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 616, Sabara and Sabara Testamentary Trust. Any discussion?
Move to issue.
Second.
Resolved that a conditional wetland permit approval be granted to John Sabara and Vincent Sabara Testamentary Trust for the proposed project upon the terms and conditions set forth therein. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 180-011, McClelland and Maynard. Any discussion?
Move to issue.
Second.
Resolved that a conditional wetland permit approval be granted to Kathleen Giffen McClelland and Denise Griffin Maynard for the proposed project upon the terms and conditions set forth therein. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 180-052, Michael Ayers and Johanna Keatsman. Any discussion?
Move to issue.
Second.
Resolved that a conditional wetland permit approval be granted to Michael Ayers and Johanna Keatsman for the proposed project upon the terms and conditions set forth therein. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We'll move on to the preliminary review secret determination, A 17192, Lorraine R. Davis Irrevocable Qualified Personal Residence Trust, and the applicant requests postponement. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 17645, Gerald Coop.
Good evening again. Marty Shea, Chief Environmental Analyst for the town. This application relates to an existing residentially developed property. The property has frontage on Carter's Creek in the hamlet of East Quogue. There is a preliminary advisory report on file that relates to the application dated March 14, 2018. The application has been made because the landowners are seeking this board's approval and a wetlands permit in order to construct a two-story addition to the existing two-story house. They would like to demolish the existing shower and a partial deck and a stair area in order to allow for the two-story addition. A new innovative alternative on-site wastewater treatment system will be installed. The new alternative nitrogen reducing system will replace the existing system, which is being abandoned. There are also some improvements that occurred at the property that need to be legalized as part of the pending application. They include a partial reconfiguration of the existing in-ground swimming pool, which was previously authorized by Conservation Board permit. Some deck modifications were also made, which need to be legalized as well. There's a fire pit with perimeter benches that needs to be addressed. And then the landowner is also seeking to construct a deck addition. The preliminary advisory report on file provides history in terms of wetland permitting for this project site. Describes a host of approvals that were granted in prior years in order to allow for various residential improvements. Those permits were conditioned upon establishment of a covenanted wetland preservation area covering all on-site wetlands, as well as upon creation of a naturally vegetated wetland non-disturbance, non-fertilization buffer. Based upon an on-site meeting that I had with the landowners and a site assessment, the property is in compliance with the terms and conditions of the prior approvals. Based upon my assessment and the setbacks that are proposed for the planned improvements, the activity is not anticipated to result in any new significant adverse wetland impacts. Moreover, such improvements will be sufficiently mitigated by the existing covenanted wetland preservation area and wetland buffer. There is a need for submittal of updated surveys. Upon receipt of those surveys, there is any portion of the buffer that is being actively mowed, the landowner will need to work with the Environment Division in order to properly restore those areas. This is an application for which we have sufficient information to make a determination. As such, I'm recommending that the public hearing requirement be waived.
Motion to waive the public hearing?
Second.
Resolved that the Town Conservation Board hereby waives the public hearing requirement pursuant to Chapter 325, Section 325-8E of the Town Code. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A180-055, Thomas Stacy and Marie Stacy.
Marty Shea, Chief Environmental Analyst for the town again. This application relates to a residentially developed waterfront property along the shoreline of Smith Creek in the Ram Pasture section of Hampton Bays. The application has been made in order to legalize various improvements that have been completed at the subject property. Property is located on East Point Lane in the hamlet of Hampton Bays. There is a preliminary advisory report on file dated March 14, 2018. The report offers a history of prior approvals and permits that have been granted by this board to the landowners, namely a recent permit that allowed for reconstruction of the existing residence and deck. This is a portion of Hampton Bays that was hit hard by Superstorm Sandy. In response to such storm damage, the applicant decided to construct a new FEMA-compliant home in order to reduce the potential for future storm damage. As indicated by the advisory report, the board had issued a permit for reconstruction. However, when the landowner had sought a renewal of such permit, my office had found that a number of project changes had been made without the requisite approvals from this board. The modifications to the project included construction of a reconfigured home, reconfiguration and reorientation of the new sanitary system. Changes were made to the pervious stone drive, as well as to various decks and a second floor balcony. The prior Conservation Board permit had required that a 20-foot wide naturally vegetated wetland non-disturbance, non-fertilization buffer be established landward of the bulkhead on this property, as there is at least 100 linear feet of functional bulkhead along this portion of the Smith Creek shoreline. This board's permitting jurisdiction pursuant to Chapter 325 of the Town Code only covers the first 50 feet landward of the bulkhead. Based upon my recent site assessment, the buffer is fully vegetated and is in compliance with the terms and conditions of the prior approvals. None of the changes that were made to the projects resulted in any significant conflicts with the construction setback standards that were originally required by this board. This is an application for which we have sufficient information in order to make a determination. As such, recommending that the public hearing requirement be waived.
Motion to waive the public hearing?
Second.
Resolved that the Town Conservation Board hereby waives the public hearing requirement pursuant to Chapter 325, Section 325-80 of the Town Code. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution to issue modification, CB 13-00086, Barbara A. Rosenthal.
Marty Shea, Chief Environmental Analyst for the town. This is an application that relates to a property in the hamlet of Flanders that suffered significant damage as a consequence of Hurricane Sandy. The neighborhood was flooded approximately to elevations of 3 to 4 feet. The landowner had previously obtained an approval from this board in order to elevate the existing home. Part of those plans had included abandonment of the existing septic system and installation of a new system. The applicant has since decided to install a new innovative alternative on-site wastewater treatment system. The amendments to the sanitary system plans will necessitate some changes in the retaining walls that will be built to contain the fill for elevation of that septic system. There is no aspect of this project that is expected to result in new significant adverse wetland impacts. The site conditions have not significantly changed, and the landowners have agreed to abide by all of the terms and conditions that were placed on the prior approvals, including preservation of the on-site wetlands and establishment of a naturally vegetated wetland non-disturbance, non-fertilization buffer through a covenant that's been recorded with the Suffolk County Clerk's Office. Accordingly, this is a resolution to approve the requested modifications to the permit in order to allow the applicant to proceed with installation of the new alternative nitrogen reducing sanitary system, as well as to proceed with the plans for elevation of the existing home.
Motion to issue the modification?
Hold on one second, excuse me. Date, whereas Conservation Board wetland permit, second page, December 12th, 2018.
I'm sorry.
It's the second page of that,
And your question is?
2017.
Was it a typo, Michael?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Do you see it on second page?
Yes.
Second page, you're saying?
Yeah, so we just got to fix those on
Yeah, that typo
the paper.
will be corrected. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And there may be a typo on the last page where it says this permit shall be valid until August 14th, 2018.
The applicant will be, let me just, the expiration date was noted as, yeah, the applicant will be seeking an additional permit renewal in order to provide sufficient opportunity to complete the project, thereby extending the valid term of the permit until after August 14th of this year.
And we can't do that in the same resolution, can we? Too far out ahead?
No, the existing permit is already valid.
already valid.
until August 14th.
We're just modifying it to that date. And then-
But that being said, an extension is going to be sought by the
So
landlord.
do we have a motion
Thank
to approve with the correction that Mike brought up?
So moved.
Second.
Resolved that a wetlands permit modification be issued to Barbara Rosenthal for the proposed project upon the terms and conditions set forth therein. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We have now completed all of the agenda except for the public hearings. So we need to wait a few minutes till 7:30. We can turn the tape off to save some tape. Welcome back to the Southampton Town Conservation Board meeting of March 14th, 2018. We're now going to begin the public hearing portion as soon as we salute the flag. I would invite everyone to rise for the salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We're going to take the public hearings out of order for practical reasons. And we're going to begin on the bottom and work our way up. A170028, Lot LLC.
Good evening, Marty Shea, Chief Environmental Analyst for the town. This is a continuation of a public hearing that relates to a property in the hamlet of Bridgehampton, wherein there is a plan for redevelopment. The property is located on the west side of Job's Lane, contains town-regulated tidal wetlands, and also lies adjacent to interior freshwater wetlands. The applicant has discussed at the prior hearing seeking a permit from this board in order to demolish the existing residence and decks, to abandon the existing sanitary system, to construct a new two-story dwelling as compared to the current one-story house, to install a partially above-ground swimming pool, related pool decks, a new innovative alternative on-site wastewater treatment system will be installed, consistent with the requirements of the Suffolk County Department of Health Services. Landowner does need to deposit fill on the property in order to elevate the new sanitary system. The fill would be contained by concrete retaining walls. There is an existing common access drive that has been constructed with pervious stone. The applicant will need to extend that drive to the front entry of the house. Below the first floor of the house, there will be a garage. The stormwater runoff that's associated with the residence will be addressed through the installation of subsurface drainage chambers in the interest of maximizing naturally vegetated buffers on the site. The applicant is planning to install the subsurface drainage within the footprint of the existing drive. There are other amenities that are proposed, including generator installation and installation of a propane tank. The applicant in my office has been in the process of working on revisions to the project plans in order to address the feedback provided by the Conservation Board in my office at the last public hearing. as well as subsequent to such hearing. The latest site plan that we're looking at was received today. It has a receipt date of March 14, 2018, and the plan has been prepared by Brooks Washburn Architect. The plan was developed in response to a rough concept sketch that I had previously provided to the applicant, consistent with the requirements of Chapter 325 in order to look at practicable alternatives. Because of the constraints of the wetlands and the property size and configuration, this is a development plan that needs some relief from the required wetland construction and buffer setbacks. For existing developed properties, those requirements are provision for a minimum 100-foot wetland building setback, as well as accommodation of a naturally vegetated buffer extending a minimum of 75 feet landward of wetlands. The on-site wetlands need to be protected as part of any development plan. The project plans for the site are fully compliant with the wetland building and buffer setbacks with regards to the on-site tidal wetlands, but the applicant is seeking relief from those requirements as they relate to the interior freshwater wetlands. Prior to tonight, I had suggested that the applicant come forward with a plan that provides for a maximum 2,400 square foot first floor footprint for the house, with the dimensions of 30 feet by 80 feet suggested. Working off that recommended footprint, there is opportunity to construct a swimming pool and an associated deck on this property in full compliance with the wetland setback standards. Since the last hearing on this application, I've been working steadily with the applicant in order to refine the plans. Some of the modifications that have been made include a redesign of the pool and initial patio area that now will be a deck area in order to negate the need for fill deposition. Again, the patio and pool would be constructed at conforming setbacks. I also asked that the size of the garage be reduced in order to shift the drive entry further away from the interior wetlands. The current garage dimensions would provide for a width of 22 feet and a depth of 32 feet. Those dimensions are somewhat, with regards to the width, are somewhat standard for two-car garages. Rather than reduce the footprint to a 30-foot by 80-foot footprint, the applicant is yet seeking approval from this board for a larger footprint on the property. As a result of the refinements, the closest setback for the planned residence with regards to building activities would be 70 feet landward of the freshwater wetlands. I had recommended that that setback be increased to 73 feet by reducing the width of the house. Plan width of the house is actually 32 feet. I may have said 35 feet earlier. Accordingly, I have asked that the applicant give further consideration to scaling back the footprint of the house, a footprint of 2,400 square feet for the first floor would be more than twice the size of the existing house footprint on the property. The footprint that is being proposed by the applicant at this time would take up some of the critical buffer linkage that I'm recommending between the freshwater wetlands and the tidal wetlands in the northern portion of the property. That buffer corridor has been recommended not only to provide for an essential wildlife movement corridor on the property, but also to mitigate the impacts of the lesser buffer that's being offered on the east side of the residence. At its closest point, the present plan provides for a minimum buffer setback along the southeastern portion of the residence and proposed drive that would only be taking the land area within 44 feet landward of the wetland boundary as opposed to the required 75 feet. So I am yet recommending that the house footprint be reduced to 2,400 square feet in response to the board's concern about the number of bedrooms. The applicant has reduced the number of proposed bedrooms from 7 to 6. I'm also asking that the applicant give further consideration to reducing the depth of the parking area in front of the garage. The present depth that's proposed would be 35 feet. I would offer that that depth could be reduced to 24 feet while still providing sufficient area for vehicular maneuverability. Such change in the footprint of the parking area at the drive entry would also provide opportunity to expand the covenanted naturally vegetated buffer. The applicant has relocated the propane tank on the property to a more secure location. My office did go through the exercise of looking at whether or not the sanitary system could be installed without deposition of fill and containment of that fill using concrete retaining walls, while the system could potentially be mounted. Such modification to the project plans would not necessarily result in significant increases in the wetland structural setbacks or buffering capacity of the property. The applicant has also previously agreed to landscape all disturbed ground, inclusive of the land area atop the sanitary system, with town-approved native plants. So in summary, I'm yet recommending that the first floor footprint be reduced to 2,400 square feet with allowance for a larger than 2,400 square foot footprint on the second floor. That would be achieved by partial cantilever of the second floor. And I'm also asking that the drive slash parking area, that the footprint be reduced in order to further expand upon the proposed buffers. at the site.
Thank you, Marty.
Good evening, Chuck Bowman, Land Use Ecological Services for the applicant. And I said I would be brief. I think we're very close on this application. We have really worked extremely hard with our clients and with Marty, and I know Marty's put a lot of time into that. I appreciate that. I think all that we're really talking about here is the size of the house, the volume of the house, if you will. We've reduced the first floor, and I think it was the board's recommendation that we then look to cantilever, which we have done. We've put an 8-foot cantilever over the pool. We've made the pool a infinity edge pool, which increased the setbacks, so that we have that to achieve our 6,000 square foot goal, if you will. We have put most of that volume, if you will, on the second floor, cantilevered 8 feet over the pool deck, which is certainly not going to impact any of the wetland areas. The setback to the freshwater wetlands, the isolated freshwater, and Marty is suggesting 30 feet. We're at 32 feet. I mean, we're talking about this much area. I think, and that certainly is an isolated wetland. We did expand the house north-south over his 80 feet to be able to make up that volume, but that's not impinging on any of the wetland areas. It is reducing, as Marty said, that there would be a reduction in that amount of buffer area, but in mitigation of that, we've also accepted all the recommendations of the driveway relocation. I will certainly accept that the garage now, the parking area, be reduced. So, I think what we're talking about is minutia here as far as that house. If the board says, we've reduced this to, say, 6 bedrooms, we really can't design the house till we have a footprint. The board says it should be 5 bedrooms. Fine, we'll redesign it as 5 bedrooms. A bedroom could be 10 by 10 or it could be 20 by 20. So
Well, that
that's fine.
separates it as a wall.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that was George's question before, and it was my unresponsive response that says, I don't know why you need 7 bedrooms either. So, I think that is certainly something that we can have as a conditional approval of the board. But, we've gone back and forth, and oh my God, we have tried. And again, Marty and my office, we've really tried to shoehorn this in. We meet all the tidal wetland setbacks, and I'll repeat myself. That is, to me, what's most important. The gradient goes towards the creek. The setbacks to the isolated freshwater wetlands are not impacting any groundwater concerns. The groundwater goes the opposite way. Wildlife corridors, I understand the wildlife, but we're talking about, the deer don't follow corridors. I know in my yard, they come right across the lawn. It's I don't know what corridor we're talking about. The raccoons come right up on my deck. The turkeys are sitting on my table beside my pool. So I don't think we should be concerned about wildlife corridors. Our wildlife is doing quite fine, the ones we have around here. And we're trying to preserve as much habitat as we can. And I think we've achieved this. And I would hope the board would look at it in a reasonable manner and say, yeah, we took your advice. We've cantilevered it. We've really done the best we could. We will accept the reduction in the parking area, which I think would be the last issue, So now we're just talking about the square footage of the house.
Chuck, could you clarify, in the notes, you have noted that under the lot coverage, or above the lot coverage rather, the main house is 2,800 square feet. Now, that would be the footprint, but under the dwelling information, it's listed as 2,744.
2744 is the first floor, okay? The second floor footprint has a square footage of 3,256.
Okay, thank you. You have come a long ways from the initial, application. Thank you for working with Marty to achieve what you've achieved so far. And the two main points that I see that are, might I say, the driving forces of the thrust of Chapter 325 is that you have met the recommended setback, structural setback for the west side of this, that is the creek side of this house. And you've also installed or recommended to, or proposing to install an IA system. Both of those go a long ways towards the environmental benefits of this property. So I want to thank you for that. Now, the staff has recommended a couple of other things. The board needs to discuss this, it looks like 2 more feet of width that possibly could be shaved off the east side of the house or not. We need to determine what the benefits of that are, or if they're not significant. The other is you've already offered to reduce the size of the garage or the driveway area leading to it. That actually is the closest setback to the wetland.
Correct.
The driveway area. And this is a shared driveway, already in existence. There may be a way to move the Y portion of the driveway, your side of it, as it reaches the property on this flag lot, further to the property line to gain a little bit more buffer.
Be more than happy to do that.
And it looks like that would make a little more sense to make a gentle curve to come into the parking area.
No, that whole area is cleared already. So, moving that driveway to the property line, I don't see as a problem at all. And that would increase the buffer to that freshwater wetland.
So how much reduction in that driveway area are you thinking about?
Well, it looks as though, we'll put it right on the property line. So, that looks like it's about another, I'd say, 8 feet, I don't have a scale with me, but it looks like it's about 8 feet.
Yeah, it's variable. The closest point, once we get past the pole of the flag lot, the closest point of the driveway to the wetlands is what's denoted as 44 feet. Is there room in your workings with your architect to increase that setback?
Well, I think we'd be increasing that right now we have 20 by 36. Marty is saying to make it that 36 feet. I
35.
believe.
Right?
I'm sorry, 35, correct. Marty is suggesting he make that 22, 24 feet?
24, he said.
24,
24.
yes.
And what I'm saying is, that's fine. So if we make that 24, and we move the rest of the driveway that's
So that'd be
going out to the
53.
Y.
So that'd be 53 foot.
Correct.
So you're fine with that?
Yes. No, I think.
How high is that retaining wall for the IA system?
6 feet.
Oh, it's 6 feet. So, I mean, you can't get pushed too much further over.
No, and I think the board had asked us to explore the possibility of a mounted system, and we did, but what it would do is push fill into the buffer areas then
I
too. So I think I think the retaining wall is actually a better solution in this situation.
So you reduced the footprint of the house from the last survey,
Significantly.
and then you extended the length a little bit to compensate because your goal is 6,000 square feet for the total house size.
Correct, but most of that volume is over the pool deck, which was the board's suggestion that we cantilever it.
Yes, right. The issue that we should discuss, and I think the driveway, I think that's fine. I think if you make that change with the driveway, the board's okay with that. Now the question for the board to decide is those 2 feet that staff has recommended to be shaved off the west side, which makes you want to go and push it farther to the north.
It's all, it's all about size. So, and believe me, I thank Marty, but we've been, on our side, believe me, we have a difficult time too, pushing and pushing and pushing and justifying, and we really have worked very, very hard to get a reasonable solution here. And I think this is reasonable. And again, I'm going to go back to the gradient going the other way. That 2 feet, you have a house here already. You have a house over here, on the north side. You have the house that you guys approved on Job's Lane that's practically in the wetlands. You have the driveway on the other side. It's an isolated wetland, and I know it's still a wetland, but it does not have the same values as the creek does. So in my mind, we're trying to do the best we can with the creek, with the sanitary, because that's where the impacts are going to be.
Just for clarity, on the east side of the house, that wall on the second story and the first story is common, right? There's no cantilevered one way or the other.
Correct.
And the cantilever is the second story on the creek side.
Yeah, it actually comes over half the deck of the pool. It comes 8 feet over the pool deck.
7, right?
Yes, I'm sorry, 7. Correct.
I'm not even a numbers guy.
No,
Amazing.
it's okay. No. I'm with George. Sometimes the numbers aren't big enough printed on these
Right.
maps,
Right. I was waiting for him to.
I've been trying.
So you did the calculation, Mike, that driveway area would achieve a 53
Foot setback.
foot setback, which maximizes, I don't see any way to get any more than that.
I mean, I look at this corner, the way this flag lot is, and he has the retaining walls for the septic system, and everything's wedged up in there, and even we're going with the 53 foot, it's getting tight for him to be able to get
Yeah.
vehicles, an emergency vehicle in there,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I'm looking at the numbers, he was saying 7 feet closer to the retaining wall, he's gonna have almost 11 feet, I mean,
Yeah, I think.
you gotta get to the property.
Right, I think we've maximized it there. I think
Yeah,
that's it.
so it's, if he's willing to do that and, keep his 32 foot wide, I don't see what we're getting out of it. If he's willing to take that extra 9 feet away out of the driveway, I think we're gaining on a buffer on that,
Well,
east side of the property.
if I could make another suggestion too, and I know Marty will work with me on this. Right now, much of this area has been mowed for years, so if we leave it as undisturbed, that's fine. But I'm sure if Marty wants some plantings, which we have to, gonna submit some planting plans for some of the other areas, I'm sure we can make this to something pretty cool.
So you're proposing an active vegetation, actively planted?
Well, I think some of the areas are gonna have to be active, and again, this whole area here floods, there's no doubt about it. We're limited to, what can go in there, but right now it's mowed, and sometimes Peyton's makes a nice lawn, but you gotta leave it alone.
You're right, that whole area is very flat and very wet
Right.
in the flood tide area, flood tide stages. Mike has proposed leaving the 32 feet. I need to get a sense of the board, what you want to do on that.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with leaving it as the 32 feet.
As much as I like to see all projects scaled down, I think you have scaled the project down quite a bit. I, for one, would be willing to go along with the 32 feet hesitantly.
We can close this hearing. We've given you and you've offered what you can do in that driveway area. Marty has recommended that, so we know where it needs to be. This survey then will be the template for the project with the simple adjustment of that driveway area to meet the thresholds that we just talked about.
Correct. Yeah.
So we don't need to leave the hearing open for you to go to the surveyor and get that done.
Believe me, I want to close the hearing. I will request that we close the hearing.
Okay.
And the driveway is gravel, right?
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
It's not stated in the survey, I had to.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Before we close the hearing, I need to ask, is there any public input? Is there anyone in the public who'd like to speak in this application? There being none, is there a motion?
Motion to close public hearing?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
No, I wanted to thank Marty. I know we spent a lot of time on this. You know, I think we-
No, backwards.
Oregon,
No, but I don't trust him with a road map.
it's a swan.
He pulled us napkins at dinner too.
So we're going to move on to the next public hearing as soon as we get these papers put away. Gary, I just want to welcome you. You are first on the agenda, but you weren't here. We're starting from the bottom of the agenda. We just have one more. It won't take very much time, and then we'll get to you. A170, 200, 121 Laurel Valley LLC.
Yes.
We don't have any new plans, do we, from the last time?
We have new information.
That new, yeah. Let Daphne present that, because that's going to be quick, and I don't think we're going very far with this, because we just want some direction from the board. So, go ahead.
Daphne, is this something new since the recent March 9 correspondence? You have
That's the
some-
last.
That's, okay. I want to make sure I can hand out.
Thank you.
Daphne Vaughn, Surfside Environmental Planning for the applicant, 121 Laurel Valley Drive LLC. I'm too short for that. So I just wanted to give the board a brief update. Since the last time we met on this application in October, my client has completed the process with the town's planning board, which was my last submission on March 9th. We amended the covenants and restrictions for the North Side Hills subdivision for this specific property. With respect to the clearing restrictions, the CNRs for the original subdivision allowed for a maximum of 30% clearing for every lot in the subdivision. It's been customary for a lot of properties to come in and change that so that they're up to speed with the current Aquifer Protection Overlay District clearing restrictions for this property. That changes it from 30% to 50%. So we've gone through that process with the planning board. We filed the amended covenant, which I've submitted a copy of for the file. With that in mind, the current clearing on the property right now with the existing violations is at 46.6%. So in theory, we're in compliance with the Aquifer Protection Overlay District clearing restrictions. However, we are fully aware that we are still in violation of the wetland buffer covenant, and we are fully aware that we still have to deal with the structural violations on the property. Over the course of the past few months, my client has also hired Barry Block and his team of landscapers and landscape architects to help us put together a buffer and restoration plan for the site. I've met with Mr. Block at the property twice to date, and my client has had a few personal family issues over the past few months, which has made him not fully able to focus on this plan as much as he should have. So as of this moment, I have nothing on paper, but we're scheduled to meet, all three of us, at the site next week to iron out all of the details that we need to. Basically, Barry and I have met at the property and then spoken to the owner on the phone, so he's not fully understanding everything that we're telling him. So ultimately, we need to meet at the site so we can all three iron everything out and then put something on paper that will hopefully be palatable to everyone for the next time that we can meet.
Daphne, if you wouldn't mind, could you maybe go into a little detail, just number some of the issues that you will be discussing with
Okay, well, the project is really, it's no small feat. No,
this is a major situation.
Yeah, so the survey is up here. As I discussed originally at the October hearing, there's a lower retaining wall here that is partially on the town property that my client put in after purchasing the property. He is fully amenable to removal of that retaining wall and anything associated with it. There's a lower, basically there's two tiers. There's an upper retaining wall and a lower retaining wall. The upper retaining wall was there when he purchased the property back in November of 2015, so he kind of inherited that. And that upper retaining wall starts here and actually wraps around here on the southern part, so it's actually at some points I would estimate it as something about 8 feet high. I would say that it is about that high in some parts. I would recommend, if board members have some spare time and want to go to the site, it's an interesting site to see. So it's really no small feat to be able to remove both of these. I'm having a hard time convincing him to remove this upper wall. I know the last plan I submitted, I had shown maintaining that upper wall because that's what he wanted to do. Barry Block has come up with a plan to remove the wall or potentially replace it with something else or do some grading, and this is what we're trying to work out. So when we meet next week, we're going to iron out these details and hopefully come up with something that is something that my client can live with. We're going to try to restore as much of the covenanted buffer as possible. However, we do need to leave some small portion of lawn between the outdoor kitchen covered patio here, so that there's just some separation between structure and buffer. But whatever we can't give back, we will accommodate for elsewhere on the property. He is definitely amenable to removing the tiki hut and the propane tank from the buffer area. It's the whole working out of these walls, which is going to prove to be quite expensive, which I think is what he's kind of stuck on. So,
The playground as well, yes, Stephanie?
yeah, any of the structures,
Okay.
he's amenable to that. And then the whole driveway issue, we're going to discuss all of that as well.
Okay. Thank you.
So that's where we're at. So I hope to come back with something that my client is happy with and that Marty can be happy with and the board can be happy with. But it's going to take me a little bit of time to get pen to paper, and
It's a lot of happiness, Stephanie.
it's a lot of happiness.
So what are you thinking, timeframe?
Where are we? March?
Ides of March.
June
We're
13th?
kind of full till May.
Maybe like Memorial Day? Memorial Day,
We can do that.
potentially?
Well,
Before we set that date,
Yeah.
you want to speak to, actually, let's you speak first, and then I'll conclude.
Okay.
Good evening, Marty Shea, Chief Environmental Analyst for the town. I'll try and be as brief as I can. As indicated by my preliminary advisory report of September 11, 2017, and as spoken to in my testimony at the October 25, 2017 public hearing on this application, this is one of the most severe wetland violations that I've witnessed in the many years that I've worked for the town. So it's certainly good news that the applicant is finally willing to develop a restoration plan for the site, as I have been waiting on that plan for the 4.5 months since the last hearing. Just briefly, and as was spoken to the partially by the applicant, there are very severe encroachments within an existing covenanted wetland non-disturbance, non-fertilization buffer at this site that was required to cover those portions of the property within 100 feet landward of the adjacent freshwater wetlands. The land was marked by restored forested slopes, consisting predominantly of oak, laurel, and heath, as was alluded to by the applicant. The alterations to this property have radically changed the composition of those pre-existing forests. Consistent with the offer that was made by the applicant, I am seeking a restoration plan for the site that removes the terraced retaining wall areas, and that all recreational improvements be removed from those areas. There is an issue of an asphalted drive on this property as well. At the prior hearing, it was indicated that the drive had been asphalted during the review of this application, which is in conflict with policies and standards for drives. So in addition to the needed reforestation and slope recreation and other remediation, there is need to replace the existing paved drives with pervious driveways. This property does, as indicated, have some history in that under a prior ownership, the original pre-existing forested slopes had been fully cleared and altered by regrading. I had put a tremendous amount of time and energy into making sure that those slopes and woodlands were fully restored. They were fully remediated under a private ownership, and then, as indicated, have since been disturbed again. I would mention that my advisory report of September 11, 2017 does set out for the applicant a framework for the needed reclamation and reforestation plan for this site. I am recommending that the covenanted areas be brought back into full compliance. So that being said, I am looking forward to receipt of the applicant's restoration plan. I would hope that the restoration could proceed and get underway this spring to early summer if possible, if not in the fall of 2018. I'm happy to offer any additional needed guidance to Barry Block and the applicant in developing such plan. And I look forward to bringing that plan upon receipt back to this board and providing feedback to both the board and the applicant. Thank you.
Thank you, Marty. Daphne, you said you wanted to come here to give us an update, which you've done, and also get a feedback from the board, and we've done part of that. I just want to summarize what I've heard and just make sure the board is in step with what I'm about to say. So part of this is that when you come back, although this is a very big project, it doesn't need to be particularly complicated. In other words, if we focus on the vision of what this is going to look like in the end, and then take steps to get there, we could have one more meeting and then close it and say we're done, if everything goes well. I would encourage you to put together this plan that you're talking about and submit it to the Environmental Division in sufficient time prior to the next hearing date, such that it can be reviewed and have time for comments and then adjustments again, so that we can save some time and not keep kicking this forward. We are coming up close to the time where it's a good time to do restorations and plantings. So there is so much history on here. You know the history, we know the history, it's in the record. I don't need to go over that. Let's talk about what it's going to look like in the end. In the end, this covered barbecue patio that is partially in the covenanted buffer, we've been talking about letting remain there, because that makes good sense. That buffer that is infringed can be made up in other places. Everything to the left side of the survey, which is the west side of the survey, in those checkered lines in that buffer area, needs to be brought back into the buffer through some major grading and some active planting. Both walls need to come down. You've offered to take down the lower wall, the one that the applicant has put together. The upper wall needs to come down also. It is showing signs of possible failure in its bending already. George and I had a site visit in this past week, and we saw that, and we met with you there, and we said some of these same things there. In looking at that, it's obvious that a great deal of fill was added here to change the slopes, to change the terrain, to change the flora in this covenanted area from the original woodland flora to something more ornamental that also generally requires more maintenance, and one of the things that this board and Chapter 325 is working to limit in places such as this. Something you might do is look at some of the previous applications on this very same property and see what this board did there. That might be a good blueprint to start with, and then make some adjustments if necessary, as your client may have some different tastes. And then, of course, the tiki hut, as you spoke about, offered to take out in the propane tank, that of course has to come out. And then the request for leaving the basketball hoop there and that asphalt driveway, that is very difficult for us to agree to, given what we normally do on properties such as this. And to be fair with other applications where we've not allowed for a blacktop driveway, there are places on this property that are outside the jurisdiction of this board. We can't speak to that.
Okay.
But where we can speak, we need to be consistent with other applicants and fair. There are places that you can create in this project to relocate that basketball hoop on blacktop. And I
That's
would
something
encourage-
I've definitely been mentioning to my client, and something that we will definitely discuss when we meet at the site.
I would encourage you to explore that. And then that pretty much covers the major points of this application.
Well, the one thing that you indicated in what you just said is about restoring the buffer pretty much in its entirety outside of maintaining that covered barbecue area. And although I understand what you're saying, one of the points that I had made at the last hearing is that the shape of that buffer has not worked for the past 4 owners. And one of the things that I tried to do with this plan that I've given you in the past was reorient some of that square footage. And obviously, what I showed before was too much. So I think what needs to happen is if we're going to be allowed to maintain that structure, there has to be some kind of a separation distance between the structures and the buffer, so that it's palatable for the owner to have his structure that you're saying he would be allowed to maintain, and then also have some kind of an area to distance himself from the no-touch zone, let's call it, buffer. And one of the things that I was trying to explore was potentially utilizing the edge of the house as a marker. That would be giving back roughly half of that area that's on the top of the retaining wall. And obviously, we wouldn't have to have all of it straight line, but maybe we could do something. We would take that walkway that's in there and push it closer to the slate wall. And then possibly,
Along the patio, and then down, and then cut around that.
Yeah.
structure. That's what you're saying?
kind of
those are-
maintain some lawn.
Those are some of the details that you can work on that it's probably premature to address here.
Because it
I
would
hear
be
what
an
you're
easy
saying.
marker, you know what I'm
There-
saying?
I agree, there needs to be a walkway at least between the buffer and the covered barbecue patio. The covered barbecue patio looks beautiful, it's well done. It's a place that beckons for people to hang out. But there needs to be sufficient safety for access around it. The challenge on this property is the naturally steep slopes.
Right,
The more space that you create for the enjoyment of utility near that barbecue patio, the steeper the remaining slope will need to be, and the more challenging it will be to establish some plantings.
I just keep thinking there has to be a pool enclosure fence legally to to separate, for the building department, for building code purposes. And my client just keeps saying the words to me, I have 2 small children and a dog. So he is afraid of the slope, and that is part of the issue that I'm trying to overcome with him. So Barry and I have been discussing this a lot, and this is where he's going to try to come up with a plan that's going to be as natural as possible of a slope, such that it will not be something that my client sees as a detriment to his children and his pet, that he does not want to maintain it. And, I don't want to have him go through this expense and then the town goes away and then we start this process all over again. And this was my concern, when I gave my whole speech at the last hearing, that this has been through 4 owners, and all 4 of those owners have had violations on this property, and they're repetitive violations very similar to this one. So my concern is that I want to come up with a plan that's going to work for both sides of the story here, and something that's going to be lasting. So I'm
Well,
trying to
this
come up with a
requires-
compromise.
This requires the input of your client and Barry Bach. And I would suggest that you work on that and don't go into very expensive surveys early on in the
Right.
program. Get some feedback from Marty in between now and the next hearing date.
You can
Because-
get a fence that goes around the pool that slips in, those black fences, I mean.
Well,
That-
but he's got
that's
a
a
dog,
non-
and
Yeah,
he's
but the
afraid
dog-
to,
What the dog, what's the dog gonna do? Dig
I don't
under it?
know.
Like, he's not gonna.
he's afraid that his dog is gonna fall off of the slope, and
I mean.
he lives
I
in
look at
Queens
this-
right
I
now,
look
so
at this
he lives on
grading,
concrete, so I
I
think
don't
that's
see how
part
you
of the
can't
problem.
grade all of this and it's it's a non-issue. I mean, it looks like it could be graded to me. I don't.
Well,
think it's
this is
that
where,
big of a
this
deal.
is where Barry comes in, is Barry is, Barry and I will hopefully together can convince him of what can be done that will be palatable to him, that hopefully will not cost him hundreds of thousands of dollars, because it's a big project. And if you do have the time to take a drive-by,
I've been there.
I suggest you, and if you've been there.
Another thing you can do is draw something out, your own sketches, and email it to the board members, and then we can give you some feedback on what we're thinking. It won't have the same official force as a meeting such as this when we're here together and discuss it officially, but at least you'll get the individual comments, and it might give you some ideas of how to eventually get to where you need to be.
Okay.
Briefly. Actually, briefer than that.
Marty Shea, Chief Environmental Analyst for the town. Of course, the restoration plan will be designed to address safety needs. However, I would caution the board that any granting of significant relief from the covenant requirements on this property may only encourage other landowners to encroach upon covenanted, preserved areas, and then come back to this board to seek to legalize those improvements. We're not talking about minor encroachments. We're talking about major encroachments. So again, I would recommend in the strongest possible way that we insist that the applicant do everything possible to bring these covenanted areas into full compliance. As indicated, I had worked with prior landowner to restore the forested slopes. The slopes were restored in a manner that did not pose any significant safety issues with regards to that portion of the property. So I will work with the applicant to address safety needs, but I think the board needs to take seriously the need for the landowner to respect the recorded covenants. Lastly, I would mention that
In regard to that, I have to say that I have some confidence that Daphne will implore her applicant, and I'm sure Daphne will use some common sense with regard to this buffer. And common sense dictates that if we're going to leave that, the barbecue area, that we must use our common sense and give some relief off the buffer there. It doesn't mean that it's going to be flagrant, but common sense dictates, I think, that we have to give us some relief there.
I agree. At the same time, I would offer that the majority of the buffer area could be restored in a manner that it could be respected in the future. This is a very large piece of property. The landowner is not constrained with regards to recreational uses on this property, as you have seen if you visited the property. Thank you.
Is there anyone in the public who'd like to speak in this application? There being none, is there a motion to adjourn this to, Tom, what do we have?
Well, do you want May 23rd, or do you think you're gonna need more time? I mean, we're getting into a clear area. From May 9th, we have a lot of room, and then May 23rd on, there's nobody. So if you wanna tell us how much time you need. But April is full.
Let's do May 23rd. Let's do it.
May 23rd it is. Is there a motion?
So move.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Daphne, before you leave, if I could just jump in, Harry, your earlier comment about Daphne emailing the members of the board, just want to remind the members of the board that they can't, that email should maybe just go to the board member assigned the project so that it doesn't constitute a meeting outside of.
That's a good idea.
This
And
one.
that's, George, that's your
Thank you,
area.
Martha.
You're welcome.
That's your area.
That's why I'm thanking you.
All right. You got George's email address, right?
I do.
Good. You can email him any time of day.
I will.
Town email address. Right? Town email address.
Yeah, we use the town email address for that, right?
Sure.
Okay.
But if there are more than, 2 members of the board on that email address, that would constitute a quorum.
So
Right,
just
right.
email George. He can handle it.
I love your confidence, Harry.
We have 2 more public hearings we're going to adjourn in a moment, but before we do that, Gary's been sitting there patiently. Let's do that one next, and then we'll finish up with the 2 that will be adjourned.
Thank you.
CB 14-00044, Gary Luciani.
You have an extra one, Tim? You have an extra one?
Good evening again, board members. Marty Shea, Chief Environmental Analyst for the town. This is a continuation of public hearings that relate to a wetland permit application before this board, wherein the applicant seeks this board's approval to demolish the existing residence and deck, to abandon sanitary system, and to construct a new residence. Early on, as part of the initial hearings, we had discussed at length the restoration needs of this property in order to address the history of clearing and unauthorized fill deposition. The landowner has agreed to work closely with my office in finalizing a restoration plan in order to address that outstanding matter. As has been spoken to the prior hearings on this application, and consistent with the wetland permit issuance standards set forth in Chapter 325, there is a need for the applicant to demonstrate that there are no practicable alternatives with regards to redevelopment of this property that can meet the minimum wetland construction and wetland buffer setbacks for this property, those being a minimum building setback of 100 feet landward of wetlands and a minimum natural buffer setback of 75 feet landward of wetlands. We had agreed early on that the minimum required 150-foot setback for the sanitary system cannot be met on this property because of the constraints of the lot and the extent of wetlands. And the applicant from early on came forward with a plan showing a new sanitary system in a location that basically the board in my office was amenable. As the review of this application has been going on for several years, the landowner now needs to address the requirements of the new local law requiring the installation of an innovative alternative on-site wastewater treatment system for new constructions, as recommended by the board and recommended by my office at the last hearing on this application. The applicant has now modified his survey in order to show an IAOWTS. That being said, both this board and my office have continued to impress upon the landowner the need to come in with a conforming plan that meets those 100-foot wetland building and 75-foot buffer setbacks. In order to facilitate that process, early on February 18, 2016, I provided the landowner with a concept sketch showing how those requirements could be met. The plan called for a house and attached garage nearly 2.5 times the size of the existing cottage. Amenities included a deck and pool area, and of course, a sanitary system and drive consistent with the wishes and the desires of the applicant. The applicant has continually come forward with plans that necessitate considerable relief from the minimum wetland construction and buffer setbacks. Accordingly, consistent with the wetland permit issuance standards, the board has asked that the applicant consider the practicable alternative of a conforming plan. Since the last hearing, I had a lengthy conversation with the applicant. As a consequence of that discussion, the applicant had come forward with some very rough sketches that needed to be refined and shown on a scalable survey. As such, the applicant just recently, on March 9, 2018, came forward with an updated survey, which is part of your records. While this plan does propose a buffer in portions of the property that is consistent with the minimum 75-foot requirement, the plan actually yet seeks significant relief from the requirements on the code. In fact, the plan, the most recent plan shows for a larger house and greater structural coverage that then was shown on the prior plans. Whereas previously the plan submitted by the applicant showed the closest house construction setback at 88 feet. The current plans appear to show even a closer setback. If you look at the breakdown in terms of existing coverage, you'll see the existing total dwelling coverage is 751 square feet. The applicant is seeking now a footprint of 3,288 square feet, which is obviously considerably larger than that existing residence, and also based on my review is even larger than the coverage shown on the last plan. In fact, total lot coverage figures are provided at the base of that table on the right-hand side of the survey, and if you compare those percents with the earlier survey, you'll see that actually now the applicant is even seeking greater structural coverage than was shown on the last plan. That being said, the applicant is with us here tonight to speak to his current survey. Unless there's questions, I'll turn the podium over to the applicant.
Gary, would you like to speak?
Sorry that I'm back in front of you guys. I actually, the plan that Marty just spoke about, all that really is the 100-foot setback plus the part of my current house that is outside of the 100-foot setback. So that was, believe it or not, that took a month for my surveyor to do, which I was shocked with, but effectively, if you look, it just has about 570 feet of where my current house is that is not 100 feet back. So I would guess that Marty's numbers are absolutely correct, but effectively what I was trying to do in this case was to say, all I'm asking to do is basically rebuild my current house and then build back of 100 feet. So that was the principal process here, along with putting in the new septic system and so on. And I also believe this is incredibly better for my neighbor Barbara, but that's besides the point. So again, and I may have been confused when I heard it, but I want to make sure there's a full 75-foot buffer. It's just a weighted average buffer because I need extra space on one side for the driveway. So that buffer there is only 60, but I make up for that by putting an 85-foot buffer in on the far side of the house. So, and I obviously, if the numbers are slightly wrong, that buffer could be 86 feet, 87 feet to get the numbers to be exactly the correct amount that he's looking for. But the buffer basically runs from 60 feet where the driveway is, jumps out to 75 feet when the driveway ends, and then switches to 85 feet on that side of the house. And, you know, preliminary calculations were within 2 or 3% of the total amount that's necessary. So, but I also, let me just pick up, there was also a second survey that I delivered, or I didn't deliver, but somebody delivered for me, and I didn't know if the reason for that survey was very simple. It's a survey that has a current, and I since there were 7 copies of each dropped off, I thought you guys would have them. But what the effect of that survey was I was hoping to connect with Marty to be able to talk to him, and we were unable to connect. And I was going to say that, is there a way, because this plan, the first plan is simply my old house plus construction 100 feet away. So, and of course, by doing that, I'm still at a setback of 78.7 feet from where my current house is now. So I found this prior survey, which is the one I sent in. I asked Mike Hemmer to update it and to sign off on it, and he did. But again, I handed the first survey in to him on February 10th and got it back on the morning of March 9th. So by the time I wanted to get that to Marty, the new version of it, because simply if I had the opportunity to meet with Marty or talk about it, I was going to say, Marty, tell me a number. I'm at 87 feet right now on this thing. If that's more important than the house way to do it, tell me 90 feet. Tell me 92 feet. I'll put everything within there.
So what
and let's
happened?
try to work something out.
So what happened?
I never got a chance to talk to Marty.
Why is that?
He never called me back.
Marty never made himself available to you, you're saying, in 3 months?
No, I'm talking about the last week. He did it, he
Yeah, I know. From the last time you were here, correct? Right?
yes?
The last time you were here, and then the first response we got from you was on the 9th, right?
And as I said.
Today's the
I'm sorry,
14th,
I
the
ha-
meeting.
I handed in my stuff to the surveyor on February 10th. And I had to wait for him to do it, and I, I'm trying my best,
No, but
Mike.
what I'm saying is, because Marty gave you a drawing, and we talked about the drawing the last time, why didn't you talk to Marty and try to get on the same page before you had the survey even draw anything, so we could,
I think the date that I sent Marty a draft of what I sent to the surveyor was somewhere around February 20th with the exact discussion, maybe give me a day or two more, somewhere around there, saying, can you give me some advice based on what I'm sending you so I could, hopefully get whatever comments into the surveyor. And I don't know if everybody complains, but I find it so hard. My surveyor is very difficult. February 10th to get it out of there by March 9th. And by the way,
it's a lot. It's a lot.
my signature I had to sign to do it, the new contract, $12,500. Everybody else who comes before you is probably rich, but that is a shocking number to me. And so Mike, to go back to it, so when I was going to send in this thing to Marty again and say, can you look at this? This is an old complete survey. Tell me if I can move it back, adjust it to get something close that you can accept. Part of it was I didn't hear back from him. The other part of it was I knew if he'd even given me any advice, there was no chance my surveyor was going to get it done for me.
can you stamp that in and let me see that?
This what I'm
Yeah,
looking at? This is just a small version. There should be 7
The
copies.
original, right?
Well,
Yeah, Gary, I'd like to, just to clarify, we have two surveys in the
Exactly.
file that just came in on March 9th.
Exactly.
One of them has purple, red, sorry, Tony, you can't read that, can you?
Can't see it.
Black, purple, and red. The other one is all black. This one is multicolored, seems to be a new drawing because it has the new IA septic system
Right.
drawn in it. Is that your current alternative that you're looking at?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes.
Okay. And the old one is an old survey, one of the original ones?
What I originally intended was, which I couldn't get done, was to add, besides asking Marty, I was going to ask my surveyor, and I did, and he said no, if he could take that survey that you're looking at, but put in a new IA system into that section, and then I was going to send that to Marty and ask, can you look at this now, make some adjustments, and see if there's some way we could find an answer. But I couldn't even get, I got my thing back Friday at 2 o'clock, or not, 10 o'clock in the morning.
Well, okay, that's okay. Let's go with where we are right now. And right now, I believe we all have this survey that we're looking at with the purple and the red on it. This one is different than the other surveys we've received. Most notably, it has the IA system installed, that's not the right word,
Notated.
noted in the building envelope. Now, there's something you covered that I want to repeat because it's very important. Because one of the tests we do on properties such as this that are constrained, that is, they cannot meet the recommended setbacks that Chapter 325 calls for. And when that happens, we do have the latitude to look at some other aspects. One of them is the average overall buffer. I want to read that part of the law just for the clarity of the board and for everyone here, just so that we can all be on the same page and understand what we're looking at. And I'm going to just do the short part that is relevant to this comment. The approving authority may consider, and I'm looking at 325 9D4, and I'm going to cover A. The approving authority may consider imposing less than the recommended setbacks if the approving authority determines that the applicant has demonstrated the following. And there's A, B, C, and D. I'm going to cover A for right now. A buffer zone with an overall average width equivalent to the minimum required buffer zones set forth in Chapter 325-9A for turf, fertilizers, pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, or similar treatments landscaping or other clearing or disturbance of natural vegetation will provide equivalent protection of the wetland, or that partial relief of the minimum buffer requirements is both reasonable and justified, sufficient to justify a lesser overall average buffer zone for such activities. That reference applied for this, your application is 75 feet. What we're looking for in this application is, we're exploring alternatives. That's the process we're going through the last couple of meetings. We're exploring alternatives to see if we can achieve a average buffer width of 75 feet. You have said that you think it's pretty close. We'll need to confirm that, but that is a very important aspect that meets the threshold that we can check off one item for looking for how we can make this project meet the conditions for issuance of a permit. So I want to compliment you on that. That's one of the goals we always look for on all these applications, whether or not we actively articulate it, because we're very familiar with the law and we kind of assume some of these things. But I just wanted to verify that, because this, for the first time that I've seen, you've submitted a survey that may very well achieve that point. So we can check that off. Good.
Thank you, but I would say that I've just done a bad job, because every single one of my proposals, I was always willing to give a 75-foot buffer. So that's 100% my fault. There's never been a discussion on less than a 75-foot buffer. I never planned on it, never thought about it. So that's 100% on me.
A buffer in this property is very important. You know this property very well, having lived there for so long and owned it for so long. The IA system is also very important. Now, one of the things that I'm seeing on this application that does not meet the recommended setback is the structural setbacks. So there are a lot of lines on this survey, and it can be a little confusing to get focused on the lines that are relevant, because the old house is also pictured here in the lighter gray. What is the closest structural setback to the wetland line?
78.7, the corner of the old house. By the way, Harry, I actually mentioned and almost got hung up on to my surveyor that this was confusing. And I almost didn't get, he almost hung up on me for it. But I agree with you. I was like, he was like, that's the way it's done. Okay. But again, if you focus on this section, there's one part of the property that does not meet the 100-foot setback line, construction setback line. That is where my current house is, next to Bay Avenue. So it is important to say that you can look from where the driveway ends, per se. If you go down and get to that 100, where the 100-foot setback line is in blue there, I stay behind it the rest of the time, from there to the southwest. So I do such a bad job explaining, but all I was really trying to do was say, can I rebuild my current house and add behind it 100, where the 100 feet setback are, which is different from Marty's, because I'm asking to rebuild my house. Otherwise, I'm with him. His thing is mine, because his is 100 foot back, mine is 100 foot back, plus the part of my house that I'd like to rebuild.
Are you proposing to leave your house there?
No, I'm proposing to raise it and rebuild it along with the rest of the 100-foot setback part of the house.
Raise, R-A-Z-E, not raise, R-A-I-S-E.
Yes. In other words, it needs to be elevated 9 or 10 feet.
Raise, demolish, or raise, lift?
Well, no, I'm sorry, it's going to be, it'll use the same foundation, but it's going to be demolished. It's not worth raising up. It's damaged.
Which version of raise are you discussing?
Yeah, no, I understand. I and I slur my words, so it makes it even more
Demolish
difficult.
and build new.
Demolish.
Can't keep the foundation. You're gonna be putting in pilings.
Couldn't
It's going to be
keep-
on piling,
yeah, it's
so.
gonna be on piling, so
you're
you're
talking
basically
about
starting,
the location of the foundation
not the exact
is the place where
foundation.
you want to build your new house,
Yes, on slab or piling, yes.
piling.
Right, so it's essentially being completely removed and rebuilt from scratch, because the old foundation is not being used.
You need to do pilings on
that's-
this property, and here's the simple reason why. If you use a slab, you're going to need to elevate it to meet the first floor elevation standards. And that's going to require adding significant fill. We don't like to see fill where it is not necessary. So pilings alleviates the need for adding significant fill in this property. You still need to put fill in to meet the conditions to pass the health department regulations for the sanitary system. We can't do anything about that. But we can do something about the house. So that's why we point to pilings.
I'm fine with pilings. I had misread a statement before that I thought somebody was leaning me towards slab instead of pilings, but I could do either. I don't know where I got that, but I thought,
I don't think it was from here.
all right.
Okay, so, Marty, I want you to come next.
Thank you, Marty Shea, Chief Environmental Analyst for the town. The reason the applicant is seeking relief from the wetland construction setbacks is because he's proposing a house that would have a first floor footprint of 4.5 times the size of the current house. He is also seeking to build amenities that don't exist there right now, including, among others, a swimming pool. As has been shown on sketches that I've provided to the applicant, there is certainly a significant opportunity to scale down the size of the house in order to meet the minimum 100-foot setback. The IAOWTS that is currently proposed is consistent with the requirements of the size house that he's proposing. It's likely that if the house was significantly scaled back, the footprint for the IAOWTS could be reduced as well. As spoken to in my earlier testimony, I did have a very lengthy conversation on the phone with the applicant after the last hearing on this application. We spoke about a host of alternatives, but I had focused and impressed upon him the need to come in with a conforming plan consistent with the direction that was provided by the board. The applicant then had come forward with some very rough sketches. The sketches were not drawn to scale, so there was an inability on my part to really provide productive feedback to the applicant based on the sketches. The applicant had indicated that they had ordered an updated survey. So rather than try and complete a review and provide feedback on very rough sketches, I waited on that updated survey. As indicated, the updated survey was only received by my office Friday afternoon. As this board knows, Town Hall was closed due to inclement weather yesterday, so there was not sufficient opportunity to thoroughly review the updated survey and communicate any feedback to the applicant prior to tonight's meeting. In summary, consistent with the intent and spirit of Chapter 325, the applicant does need to further explore practicable alternatives. The first test with regards to issuance of a wetland permit is whether or not you can come forward with a conforming plan. If you can, then That is the direction that the town is charged with going to, rather than entertaining plans that provide for average all buffer widths in order to allow for significant relief from the required wetland building setback. So while there is, of course, a need to provide relief from the required minimum 150-foot setback for the sanitary system, and there's also a need to provide relief for the driveway entry. Otherwise, the plans can certainly be modified again to provide for a minimum of 100-foot wetland building setback, and thus be consistent with the wetland permit issuance standards set forth in Chapter 325. So in my lengthy conversation with the applicant, consistent with the direction provided by the board in many hearings, I impressed upon the applicant the need to come forward with a plan that conforms to the minimum required wetland building and buffer setbacks. Thank you.
I agree with that. I'm sorry if I gave a different impression. We had a conversation. He impressed on me the need to come up with a 100-foot construction setback, and I sent him back something to say, can you take this and adjust it? And that wasn't what he was looking for. So that's where we are. But I just wanted to, I was not, you know, I was just, again, I'm still trying, and that's why there was a second survey produced and sent out there, because I just thought that since somebody might look at it and think, you know what, although there's certain benefits to the one of rebuilding your current house and building 100 feet back, would be more comfortable because of whatever reason to have, instead of that being 78.7 feet, would be more comfortable. Marty might be saying, all right, I doubt it, but it'd say, all right, if you could put everything behind 92 feet, would become more comfortable with that. And I'd say, okay, I'll go to my surveyor, my architect, and redesign it and go from there. But
All right, let's take it one step at a time, if it's okay with you, Gary.
absolutely.
I think that you've made great strides with regard to this buffer, okay? And I think if you can maintain the buffer, if it can be shown that what you're talking about with regard to the buffer is true, I think then we can start working on the building setbacks,
That's great with me.
okay?
Gary, I want to point out one thing, and then I want to ask you a question. First is, you refer to the existing house. So philosophically, just confirm if I understand what your application is. You want to take the place where your current house is and remove it, and in its place, and going back a ways from the wetland, build a much larger house, but using your footprint as your baseline, if you will.
Yes.
And you'll also provide a 75-foot average buffer width. So you speak of that, and I understand that for the location. But I want you to understand that when you remove your house, you don't have vested rights that gives you the right to build there in the same place again. We look at that as a new application, and we use the standards of Chapter 325 so we try to achieve those standards. I just want to point that out. But now here's my question for you. You have said that you want to achieve the 75-foot buffer, and you want to achieve the 100-foot setback, and yet this survey does not achieve the 100-foot setback for the building structures. Why not?
I'm sorry, I don't mean to be argumentative, but I have not agreed to the 100-foot building setback, and that's what our issue is. Otherwise, it would just be a design issue.
No, I don't consider it argumentative. We need to build the record, we need to understand what the record is, because we need to make a decision that respects the landowner and respects Chapter 325. We need to find that place, and when we get there, that meets, that you're satisfied with, that is the house that you want to build, and we determine that it does meet the conditions for issuance of a permit, then we can close this hearing and move on and issue that permit. So that's where we're headed. That's our goal. That's always our goal as we go through this process. So this is a process of getting more information so that we can get to the best decision that we can. So you have not agreed to the 100-foot building setback. I want to know why not?
Because I'm liable to be the foster parent of 4 kids this summer, and I want to build a house that I'll be able to live in for a long time, and I need an extra, whatever that is, 570 square feet. It makes a difference in putting in 5 one-bedroom for me and 4 little bedrooms for them. So and I actually think that in generic terms, it's not unreasonable, because I'm trying to provide, and I have agreed to everything else that Marty has requested, any reclamation, everything else that's dutifully noted that I'm agreeing to, full buffer, new IA system. It's not a bad, but also remember, that's why I sent a different second survey in, which was, I'm willing to try to find, if for some reason this doesn't work, help me do something that could get me to a reasonable.
That was my point when I was asking the questions before, why we haven't received anything until March 9th, and your answer was, as your survey, it took a month. But you didn't have to put it on a survey, because Marty, all you had to do was in that time frame from the last time you were here to March 9th, was just to sit with Marty and say, how about this, how about this? Because he gave you a sketch of what would be accepted instantly. And I'm looking at this and I'm saying, he's really not that far off from being able to have something like this, but I see where we could probably trim off some of your building envelope to be able to get you to where you need to be. But then you just said to Harry you weren't really amicable to doing something like that to maintain that septic. So the setback. So I like seeing the innovative alternative septic system. I think you're almost there. I mean, I could draw a straight line and your project's done and it would be approved.
I want to just because I like you, I want to explain something to you. Not a good excuse, but I stupidly did not see Marty's drawing when he sent it the day after I left. The next day he sent a drawing of the IA system. I spent most of January. No, but
Hold on. I
I'm blaming
clearly
me.
said,
I'm blaming me.
I'm not even buying that, because I clearly pulled this up, and it wasn't at the last meeting. It was the meeting before that I requested this from the file, and I asked Tom. I said, "Hey Tom, where's Marty's drawing?" And we presented it to you. You've seen this.
No, I'm not. I wasn't saying that. 1 second. Not his drawing of the IA system. He was nice enough the day after our December
Right.
9th, he sent me an email. I didn't see at the bottom of it there was a drawing. It's really, I'm not using it as an excuse. I just wanted to explain. I spent the month of January learning everything about IA systems for completely no reason.
Right.
Working every week for like 2 hours with John D.
The IA
Giuseppe.
system's not even an issue in this survey that I'm looking at. It's not even an issue.
I know it's not, but I had
The
to make
issue
sure
is
I
that
knew what
you
I was
want-
putting in. No, I just want to say, I said to you, I was a stupid of me to do, but when you look and you start reading about what the IA systems do and how important they are, it's amazing. And you sit there, I probably downloaded 10,000 pages of different stuff. And then luckily I had John D. Giuseppe from the Suffolk County Department of Health. He actually was sweet enough to work with me time and time again. And just when I called Marty back to tell him that I was moving forward, I looked and I saw Marty's sketch. and that's the first conversation Marty had, where all I said was I felt like a dumbass, because I probably would have done some of the work, but I'm just trying to explain to you, it's not a good excuse, but I wasn't sitting around doing nothing in January. I was trying to learn everything about IA systems.
See where that line that says 75 feet right here by the proposed pervious driveway? See that
Yes.
line, 75 feet?
Yes.
You can get that driveway in that 75 feet, push it in, you're almost there.
We'll have to push everything back, but that's, Mike, I want you to know, I haven't had the opportunity to, but I'm more than willing to work something out.
Well,
I just-
no, you're not, because you had the opportunity from the last meeting to March 9th to meet with Marty and do this. And instead, you come to the public hearing and we're redesigning things again. And that's why this project's been going on for as long as it has, because it's not getting done. And I know you spent 12.5 on the survey, and that's why I'm saying you didn't have to do that. We didn't say you had to have a survey. We wanted you to have a plan that you worked with Marty to get to where you need to be, based on his drawing, your drawing, and a compromise, to show that you're looking to remediate and use practicable alternatives to get to where you need to be. And I'm looking at this right now, I can draw a straight line and I can move your driveway in, and I think we're almost there. You see where I'm saying that straight line is?
I do see that. That 75 foot, I come back to the 75-foot buffer. Do not underestimate how important that is, because the law specifically looks for that standard. So we rely on that standard. When we achieve that standard, we get excited, because now you've done your part of what needs to happen for Chapter 325. We can't demand more than that without showing good reason why it needs to happen. But you've done your part on that. But now this, the pervious driveway, that also is considered in Chapter 325 as structural, of needing a structural setback of 100 feet. If those setbacks have to be met in every single location, then this board doesn't have to be here. Anybody can just check off, you either do it or you don't. It's pass, fail. But we look at an application such as this, and we do have some flexibility. So we can work together to find a way to achieve these things, and we are getting closer. I don't think we're there yet, because there are some things that don't meet that, the requirements. Now, one of the things is that although there's a 75-foot buffer, there is an encroachment on the pervious driveway, and there's a building setback at one point, the closest point of your house, proposed house, of 78.7. We always require at least a 5-foot separation between the buffer and the structure. That's part of the state standards for safety and for fire. And, if you gotta put a ladder up, you gotta have some space to work. So let's work on that number right there. The 75 feet buffer means that the house has to be starting at 80 feet minimum for safety. The law still recommends that it go back another 20 feet. We haven't gotten there yet. We're taking one step at a time here. Is there a way to move that driveway out of that 75-foot buffer?
I honestly don't know. I mean, I'd be more than willing to try.
You're going up and you're putting pilings in.
I honestly don't even know what the legal requirements are for a driveway. If it's 15 feet or 12 feet or 14 feet or 20 feet.
I pose that question because that's a question that we need to answer. If we can get that driveway, once again, inside that 75-foot buffer line, then that's another threshold that we need to meet. Because right now it protrudes into the buffer, which means we can't buffer the driveway. There may be a way Sometimes parts of septic systems are constructed underneath the driveway. This will be a pervious driveway. There may be a way to achieve that. You are in a high groundwater area.
Maybe where the leaching fields are. If I honestly, I'm just, or I could reverse
You can reverse it.
I could reverse it potentially.
Do you have a retaining wall proposed around that septic system?
It is what Mr. Di Giuseppe called a non-water retaining wall. Meaning it's because it's an IA system, it's only required to be 5 feet from it's similar to Marty's sketch, 5 feet from a retaining wall. I guess there's one that's a water retaining wall and a retaining wall. This just needs to keep fill in there because the IA system is 5 feet, 6 feet high.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I'm sure you can push that front wall on the north where that ST, that can go in. I see a straight line opportunity at the 107-foot setback line. That line right there where it's says 23 feet straight across. And then slide that parking straight down.
Would anybody know the answer if you did have a retaining wall there, would it be possible to put a parking area on top of the retaining area? Would anybody know the answer to that? The only reason I say that is if you look at this photo, okay, where, consistently this area gets flooded, right where your driveway is always going to be flooded. Where you have a proposed driveway right now. If you were able to put it on top of the leaching field, not only would it be elevated, so your vehicles wouldn't be inundated with.
Right.
with,
I've seen that.
Water.
With
But
gravel
I
on
don't
top.
know if you can construct a parking area on top of the leaching, so I think Marty's going to address that. Or he could just say no.
Marty Shea, Chief Environmental Analyst for the town.
That's good, George.
The IA component of the sanitary system can be beneath the drive, which means that there can be the ability to grade the drive so that you're parking above a portion of the elevated septic system where the concrete walls are. Generally, your preference is not to do that because it can present some issues. But, that is likely to require the deposition of significant amounts of additional fill in order to bring that drive grade up, the end result of which will be an increased severity of flooding on Bay Avenue and even greater ponding of water on Bay Avenue than we have at present. So you want to be very careful with an application like this because of the flooding situation on Bay Avenue. You want to absolutely minimize the fill, and any extension of the drive from the street up above the septic system is probably going to necessitate significant quantities of additional fill, which then is going to dam some of that water and push some of that water that comes up Bay Avenue into the properties on the opposite side of the street. So I would recommend against that in this case.
I'm sorry, you would recommend against that?
Whereas
Parking area over the leaching.
there may be an option where the IA component is beneath the portion of the driveway, I would, at first glance, recommend against bringing additional fill in to raise up portions of the side of the driveway outside of the septic system, because that's going to displace additional water into Bay Avenue. And we already have a history of flooding and ponding.
Yeah, but he's gonna have to, but he's gonna have to have a retaining wall and regardless on that property because of the shallow water table.
Yeah, the sketch
So-
that I initially provided, plus the IA sketch that I later provided in December to the applicant, provides for the needed retaining walls for the elevated sanitary system, yet keeps the driveway at least 75 feet back from wetlands. That being said, the IA that I had sketched is
Smaller.
somewhat smaller because it's designed for a smaller residence than what the applicant is proposing. So much of the applicant's plan, inclusive even of the sanitary system footprint, is driven by the size of the house that's being proposed.
I'm sorry, I can't recall where you had your driveway on the sketch. Was it on the north side of the house?
Yes.
But what I'm trying to appeal here is, we have an application that's extremely difficult, and the applicant, obviously, everyone may not agree, but he's going to great pains to try and fit this in. I'm trying to use some common sense with regard to this driveway. I'm very familiar with this road. There's a history here. I've been out here for about 30 years, and it has not changed in 30 years. So I don't think it's going to change much in the next 10 years. Where you have where the driveway is right now will consistently be underwater. There's no way that you're going to be able to park a car there without it being inundated with water.
Or a lot of fill.
Well, I don't want to go there. I didn't want to go there because the fill is being brought in for the septic system, and I thought that we might be able to connect the two. You cannot have this driveway here the way it is, street level. I mean, it's not a driveway. I mean, if he comes to, he could keep a boat there, but you cannot keep a vehicle there. So, I mean, we have to do something about it.
That being said, there is, there is I provided on my initial sketch a very large footprint for the drive and parking area that provides for a depth of greater than 25 feet. Not only to provide for vehicular maneuverability, but also to bring up the grade somewhat in order to make sure that in order to make sure that the landowner can park the cars in a garage that's elevated somewhat above the existing grade. These are all design issues that can be worked out.
I'm sorry, how did you plan to elevate the garage?
My recollection is that the applicant is not required to build on pilings in this location, that he's in an AE zone and he can build a concrete foundation with hydrostatic openings, hydrostatic flood vents. So that provides greater design opportunity with regards.
Pardon me for interrupting, Marty, but again, I go back to these photos, and I think that your recommendation would, in fact, push the water more into the water and onto other properties. I think if he had it on pilings, at least the water could at least be covering the rest of his property rather than being pushed out into the road and on other properties.
Well, that of course another design option, and there are benefits to that, in that it lessens the interference with natural flooding and drainage. So I would agree that constructing the house on pilings probably is the better option.
I've seen the septics, the IA system built up with maybe it's a 6-foot wall and it ramps up. and people park, and the house is on pilings at the top of that ramp. And I can see that this can easily ramp up here, he can park right at the top here. We could cut this straight line in here, it's only losing 800 square feet right there. And you could bring this down probably to match that line. And he could park right up there and then put a step going right up into that house.
Let's hold that thought. And I want to ask you another question, Gary. You have proposed your driveway to be on the north side of your house. I am looking at photos as part of the record, and this is, you've probably seen that because it's from the last rainstorm, it was taken March 8th. Now that pond that goes right next to your house is where your driveway is proposed. Let me ask this question. Do you have any reason why that driveway cannot be put close to the property line on the south, next to Bay Avenue?
I would love it to be there for my neighbor's sake, for one thing, and I actually asked John Giuseppe if they would have a problem with it, and he didn't even know about, generic flooding, as bad as it is, but he pointed me back to say, if your conservation board would allow it, he would allow it because of the necessity of getting an IA system into somewhere that doesn't have a septic system now. I do want to add one thing about the flooding, which is I've been calling on, whenever I remember, every 2 weeks, the highway department, and asking them, because at the end of Bay Avenue, there are 6 catch basins and a drain system set up, and they just don't uncover it. So that is one, it's not, obviously it's still going to be flooding down there, but if that wasn't completely closed off under sediment from Sandy or whatever, it's frustrating me because no one listens. I just leave messages and no one calls me back. And I've even sent them over the actual drawings that they sent to me, showing that all they have to do is uncover the pipes to get that done. But no, if you would want me to explore that with Suffolk County Department of Health, I would. It's just going to move the septic, whatever, 15 or 20 feet towards the wetlands, but we get the driveway in on the borderline on the south, or whatever that would be, west side.
It may require moving the septic, but also explore, as Mike suggested, not moving the septic and using the driveway on top of the leaching field. See if that's a possibility, because we do like to see the septic system up in that corner. That's the farthest distance away from the wetland. We cannot meet the recommended setbacks. It's impossible to, but that is the best place in this property to put it. So we'd like to leave it there. See if you can find a way to be able to use the driveway on top of part of that septic system. That would double the use of that property. It would also move your driveway out of the buffer zone. That's a biggie. That's a biggie, because that means that the 75-foot buffer may very well be met. Right now, it is not met because of that driveway area.
So,
Do you understand what he's saying about this, about that?
Yeah, try
Where
to
it's
get a
leaching field
driveway.
here, so you would pull in from the south side and park up. So if you can ramp it up.
or I could just park
Or
over the
park-
leaching
Right,
field,
or
couldn't I?
park, yes.
Yeah, there may be engineer specifications of how high over the leaching field you need to be to disperse the load of the car. Those are things you can figure out with your engineer, and then design something that makes that work.
Well, I mean,
I got a question. This is a picture that is part of the record that was sent to us, and this is a picture that was taken, I guess it was last week. And this is a lot of, well, here, take a look at, there's a lot of flooding there. My question, and you're very familiar with this property, so I want to get your take on this. That water level, is that the same level as the bay, or is that rainwater that hasn't drained off?
that much I do know from when I use it. It's not salt water. it's always fresh water.
It's fresh water.
It's fresh water, so it's coming down, and part of it is the drain system at the bottom, that, because it goes into my front yard and side yard and everywhere, and if it was salt water, which it was a few times, like with Sandy, in other words, it killed everything. But that's a relatively frequent occurrence, and so that's fresh water. And it's a highway department issue, effectively, that they just don't want to deal with. And then the second thing was, and I still haven't found out exactly how or why it occurred, was the other thing was that there was, from generations old, that culvert pipe, and somebody cut the culvert pipe off and threw it into the thing, and no one has spoke. I have no idea who did it. I think I've been claimed innocent. But my point being, the water used to drain down the ditch from the edge of Bay Avenue out the pipe and into the bay, which obviously I think is not good, but that's the way it was designed. And so when that pipe also got shut down, somebody cut it and filled it, the water that used to go out in the bay isn't going anywhere. So a double combination of no catch basins, no water system.
Okay, I think we've made some good progress here tonight. Gary, I want to thank you for a different approach. We're getting into the meat and potatoes of this, and we're making progress. We're not there yet. So I think we should wrap it up now, because I think we've gone as far as we can tonight. But I just want to sketch out the homework assignment, if you will, to accomplish between now and the next time we see you. There is no one in the public, so I cannot ask for any public comments. But what you have here is a great starting place. So here's what we're going to try to tweak. We're trying to tweak that driveway by moving it over on top of the leaching field. See if you can find a way to utilize that leaching field for a dual role of the driveway and the leaching field. That will free up and achieve a 75-foot setback line to the buffer. And I'm just looking at this. If that driveway were not there, Mike, you're really good with these numbers. Does that mean that there's no place that infringes on the 75-foot buffer?
You are correct.
Okay. Then that means your 85-foot buffer is additional buffer that you don't have to do. But if you do that, listen to me carefully here, because you're going to like to hear this. Sometimes we allow the applicant to infringe on that 100-foot structural setback line when they provide additional buffer to offset, in other words, to mitigate that encroachment. There may be a way to have some flexibility here. The key is to get that driveway out of there and move it on the north. Not only does that help to meet the
South.
conditions, I'm sorry, on the south. Not only does that help to meet the conditions of a permit based on chapter 325, but when I look at this picture and the flooding on this property, there is no place that I would picture on this property as a good place to put a driveway, but that is a better place to put a driveway.
So let me just repeat back. So
Get rid of
number
your
one is
driveway.
Try to get the driveway either way to the north, best benefit
No.
underneath
South.
the leaching
No,
field.
get rid of the driveway that's on your survey
West.
and park on your leach field. That's it. See if you can
Second
figure that
best
out.
would be to somehow move everything back so the driveway doesn't enter the buffer.
Right, correct.
Right. So that's a second.
Yeah.
First best is figure out.
But first best, because that means you're going through less flooding to get to your property. And right now, on this picture, if you're driving, if that house was there, and you had to drive and park your drive on your property, you'd have to go through a flooded road to get there, as of the rainfall of that time. And
Come
that
here.
probably is
Come here.
gonna happen regularly.
See this? See that? Get rid of that
All right.
and figure out a way to park right in here. And you're done.
That's probably the simplest thing to try to do by far. So I'm gonna have to, I'll work with John Giuseppe and try to get him to help me. He'll direct me one way or the other,
What I would recommend, see if it's possible,
and then
then
get back
meet
to
with
you.
Marty.
You're
And then say,
probably
Marty,
gonna-
here's what we got.
You're probably gonna have to consult an engineer, Gary.
John Condon, I think had worked on this before, but yeah, I mean, I will preliminary check it out, check it with Marty, go to an engineer.
Yeah.
That's the way it works.
Don't even don't get the survey.
We need to set a
So,
date for
Marty.
another meeting. Yeah, I wouldn't go through the expense of a survey until we finish the next hearing and get to a place where you say, that's it, we're done. Now put that on a survey. Otherwise, you spend a lot of money and nobody likes to do that.
Game of that.
Okay, we need to set the next hearing date.
I'm not in a hurry because I'm,
We
this,
have,
even this takes a huge effort on my part, so if your people really want it in like 6 weeks, I'm not one of those people. I'll
No,
take
we're-
whatever's reasonable for you guys.
we'll work with you. We'll work with you. We have openings in May, either the first or the second week in May, or after
Or
that.
anytime later.
April, we're busy, but May or later,
I'll take then to May.
May 23rd.
May 23rd.
Sounds great.
Would someone like to make a motion?
So moved, May 23rd.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
We still have a couple of items on the agenda. We have to adjourn a couple of public hearings. A 170191, Charles J. and Stacy A. Comiskey. And the applicant requests a 2-month adjournment. Tom, what do we got?
Well, 2 months. Well, anything after May 23rd is free, so if we're looking 2 months, we're looking at June 13th or later. What's the reason?
Yeah, they're looking for June.
Yeah.
They have not
Let's,
completed surveys, they said it's gonna take them at least till June.
let's do the end of June then,
June
because
27th.
that gives us a lot of flexibility with applications.
Sunshine made a motion.
Second.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And I'm not asking if anybody in the public want to speak, because there is no one in the public. I can see that, maybe others can't. A 16192, Philip J. and Jane A. Elliston, and that is a request to adjourn till March 28th is printed here, is that accurate?
Yes,
We're looking for March 28th? Ain't gonna happen.
What's we got?
March
Let me
28th?
look at March
1, 2,
28th.
3, 4, 5, 6.
Yeah.
how about the
May.
first meeting in April?
April 11th.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4,
Let me-
5.
Who's on here at the end of March? Are they all gonna show, or is somebody gonna adjourn?
Yeah, but the number of times they've been adjourned, eventually someone's gonna show up.
We have two, one was 8 adjournments, one's 9.
Well,
And a 4 and a 3.
you
know
can
what?
take that chance, but one of these times they're all gonna show.
How about April 11th?
We got two, the first two have been adjourned many times. And that's probably gonna get adjourned again.
All right, let's
That
roll the
one,
dice.
Well,
this one,
I'll say again, the next time we entertain adjournments from people who have had a long history of adjournments, you gotta push them
Push
far
them
enough
back.
back because all they do is clog up the schedule for
Agreed.
everybody else.
yeah.
And they never follow through, so all they do is they're,
Yeah, they'll adjourn. So let's do it. Let's go for the 28th. Tom, what do you say?
28th, you mean?
Yeah. We got an 8 and a 9. I bet they don't
What?
show.
Let's do it,
Listen, whatever.
let's do it.
It's up to Tom.
They
He's
make,
the
no,
schedule
I'm not
king.
the end all, but just
It'll be
bring
a
your
full moon,
5-hour
it'll be almost
energy.
like daylight at midnight.
All right.
All right.
To adjourn?
to March
turn into a
28th.
pumpkin at midnight. so.
Okay, is there a motion to adjourn to March 28th? Sunshine moved. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Under
Opposed?
duress, yes.
We have finished the agenda. Is there a motion to
Can't do
adjourn?
that.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We stand adjourned. Thank you.